sit back, relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, joined by author Grace Helena Walz. It is so great to have you here, and I am loving this interview because we're going to be talking all about the South today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and get to talk books and just, chat a little bit more about Good Hair Days.
And Good Hair Days is your latest novel, but this is your second, and these have released pretty close together. The Southern by Design.
Yes. So Southern by Design was my debut, and that was just out in February. And then now I have Good Hair Days that's coming out exactly, actually, to the date, 9 months later. So I've been joking around and calling them my Irish twin books because they've come so fast. But I'm just so excited and feeling so grateful to be able to get to do two books back to back so close.
And Good Hair Days is so fun. For those who haven't read it yet, let's give them a brief synopsis.
Yeah, so Good Hair Days is about two sisters who team up with their maternal aunts to save their struggling family beauty shop. So it's set in a small southern town. The beauty shop is Dolly Parton themed, so it's a bit of a hole in the wall. And the two sisters they team up in these fun hijinks to save the day after kind of a renovation gone wrong situation. But then, another part of the book is the younger sister gets a life-altering medical diagnosis. And so at that point, they really have to dig deep and rely on the love between them to kind of carry them through. So we're calling it a modern take on Steel Magnolias meets Hello Beautiful.
And it's so fun to read. And as a Southern girl myself, I really see those Southern themes woven into it. One, those strong family bonds.
Yeah, and it really is a story about family. It's about family legacy and it's about family, past and present. So for the girls, the two main characters, their mother is deceased. And she was a big, big personality. She had a really big story of her own. And when she passed, she kind of left these expectations for the girls that, for better or worse, kind of set them on certain paths. And so a lot of the arc that they go through, the characters go through in the story is going to be about, what do I want for my life versus what did my mother want for me? And the maternal aunts are especially helpful in that way, that they have a perspective that maybe the younger women don't. And so really by the end they've wrestled with a lot about family and what it means and really what they take from it moving forward.
I love that they have a family name that they pass down as well.
Yes. So the family name, that's was a big part of the story. Whether in Southern by Design, my debut, names were a big thing as well. And, as an author, I think a lot about names. I love getting to pick out the names for my characters. But I also think a lot about what names mean. In the South, there's a lot of tradition around, giving names to passing down names, family names. And so I thought a lot about, what does that give, when it's a gift, when it's a positive situation, and also like, what are the challenging parts of that? If you're given a certain name, are you also kind of saddled with certain expectations for what, your life should be like. And so in the story, the family name is June. The name June is given to every firstborn daughter. And so in our story, the firstborn daughter is actually named Georgia. And so that has really kind of thrown her for a loop and really kind of set her on a specific path that may or may not be a fit for her. So that's what she's wrestling with too. She really wants to be home. She wants to be at the beauty shop. But because she's gotten this different name, she's kind of feeling like perhaps her what's been given to her in this new name is this kind of directive to go out and do and be something bigger and better than this small town life.
So I can relate to names being passed down. I have the same middle name as my mom, and then I gave that middle name to my daughter as well. So it really is a Southern thing.
It is, yeah, and I think it's so beautiful. I love the idea of a family name, but I also think, thought a lot about what happens if you're not the person that gets the family name. But I love a family name. I love the traditions. I especially love the stories too about, oh, well, this was my grandma's name, and this is what she was like, and hearing those things as well. But I've always wondered about how it impacts people, and how they move through life.
Grace, I love the name of the book, Good Hair Days. Was that the original name or did that evolve during the editing process?
So it was part of the original name, which is I for my debut, I had to change the name. So, in publishing they go through, and really what's important is having a name that, captures the essence of the book, so that when a reader picks it up that they get kind of a first impression of the book. And my original title was Good Hair Days in June. And so we ended up changing that because, I wanted to put the June pieces in as well. But we ended up going with Good Hair Days, and I was thrilled that I got to keep it because, as an author, I don't always have the folks on the larger editorial team. They have great ideas as far as titles, but I love that one so much that I was just thrilled to get to keep it. And it connects into the story as well. So when the two sisters and their aunts team up to kind of embark on these salon saving hijinks, they name themselves, they call them the Good Hair Days when they sit down to meet. And there's, a part of the beauty salon, like the slogan is, a good hair day is never far away. So it was really fun to be able to also have a title that really connects into the story as well.
And also, I love that you wove in the Dolly Parton reference because we all love Dolly.
I know. And I love Dolly too. I mean, she's just such an icon. And I think, especially for the women in this story, she just captures, so much she's aspirational, right? She was a woman who, made her own way, and she had dreams, and she became this big thing. And not only that, and she has the hair, which for this story is also particularly important, that she has this big hair and this big personality. And that's so much like the Louise women in this story as well. And it was just such a good fit as well. And I wanted for the salon to be somewhere that felt like a community spot. It didn't feel like just for the Louise women, that this was a place for all women in their community, and that people were welcomed in. And I think that kind of, the Dolly Parton theme is very DIY in the book. It's very, clippings, magazine clippings, and things stuck up on the wall. That's the pre-renovation look. And that too was important to me because I wanted it to feel like something any of us could do. Like when we start as teenagers and we might maybe rip pictures of our favorite celebrities from a magazine. At least that's what we used to do back in the day. And you tack it up on your wall. That it was just so fun for me. And I think, Dolly, she just embodies so many of the same traits that the women in this story do. And it was just such a treat for me to get to put that in.
In a salon, when you go to the salon, sometimes it's just like therapy, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, going to the salon inspired this whole thing. Um, I was I went to a salon, and there were these two women running it, and they were like chatting like sisters, and I was just enthralled by them. They were speaking as if like nobody else was there. For me, I was like, wow, this is a story. Like these people are a story. What's going on in their life?
My grandmother, I remember this vividly. She would go to the salon every Friday, but she would call it the beauty shop, and she loved it.
Yes. And I think, especially for this small town that I wanted to write, where it's a tight-knit community. There's a whole group in the book that is kind of a side character group called the Silvers. And they are, the silver-haired ladies, the retirees that come in routinely. And they're kind of cherished in the salon as this reliable, really generous and kind group of women. And for them, it's this ritual that they love. And for the Luis women in the story, it's a ritual that they love. The hair and the care that they put into it is a where the way that they love one another, and it's a way that they take care of themselves. And there's even a part in the book where I say, the girls, Georgia and Junie, the two point of view characters in the book, their late mother, June, would say, look better, feel better. And though it's not a superficial thing, because what she meant was, if you take care of yourself, you will feel better. And the way that those women know how to do it is by doing hair.
And it's so true. And I remember growing up kind of with that mantra too. My mom never left the house without her makeup on. And not because she felt like she had to, but it just made her feel better.
Definitely. And I'm the same way. I feel like when I actually get dressed, I feel like I'm prepared for the day. And I think there's something mentally that happens there, that if you do something that makes you feel good, whether that's hair or makeup or just changing clothes, picking out an outfit that's either comfortable for you or makes you feel good, that it's those rituals that help us to feel cared for. For some folks, it's, getting their coffee right. It has to be a certain way, or it's a breakfast item that, they want to have every day, or certain routines, meditation for some folks, that it's those things, whether it's a physical thing like hair or makeup, or something very spiritual, that we all have those things that if we do them, we know we can feel better afterwards.
We do. We do. I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing. And you have two books out in the first year of being a published author. Tell me a little bit about your journey and how it came to be.
Sure. So I tell people, a lot of authors have these stories about, oh, I knew I was going to be a writer ever since I was a child, either a mentor or a teacher, told me I'm going to be a writer. And for me, that wasn't the case. I've always been a reader, so I've always enjoyed books. But also in life, I've kind of gone through phases with reading as well. I haven't always been as avid of a reader as I have been in my adult life. And I was actually a social worker for that was my professional career. And I think one of the things I loved about being a social worker was hearing people's stories and listening to them, and really being a person to kind of hold that moment for them. So I've always been interested in people, and I think taking the leap to writing was, and developing characters it has a strange connection to it. I think that has helped me in terms of getting some perspective. Actually, I have two children. My son is my older child. He's now 8, and my daughter is 6. So I started writing when I was pregnant with her, really because it felt like something that would be a really big challenge to do. And I knew that, like, I was kind of on the clock for, this newborn baby is about to show up, and I'd already done it once. And so I knew that, once that newborn arrives, that there's really no, downtime, and it's just that kind of consumes your life. So I said to myself, you know what? I think it would be really cool to try to write a book. And I gave myself the out. I definitely said to myself, if you start this and you don't like it, you can quit. You don't have to push to the end just for the sake of it because you said you wanted to try it. Like, genuinely try it. And I started and I was hooked. I loved it. Now, I didn't really have many skills when I started. I was a reader, so I knew, I had a good grasp on language, but I wrote a really, really awful first book that was way too long, and it was meandering, and it was just a mess. And I think, a lot of authors have an awful first book that has not seen the light of day. And so, but once you hit that point, you know that you can do it. And so I think mentally something shifts after that, where okay, I can do this. And at that point, I really got serious about it. I did a lot of research. I started reading craft books. I started reading blogs of professionals, and their posts they would put online about how to do this as a job, how to get published. And then I started thinking more strategically about what kind of ideas would readers want to read, because you can write and, until the cows come home. But if it's not something a reader would enjoy or want to pick up, then it's going to stay in the drawer. So it was about 5 years between when I started writing fiction and when my first book, Southern by Design, came out. And my process has evolved a lot over that time. I think the more that I write, the more efficient I'm getting. I used to waste a lot of time. I will say there's no such thing as wasted words. I think sometimes you have to write through things to get you where you're going. Um, but for me, I've gotten much better at planning out my ideas and what I want the shape of the story to look like, and really challenging myself to get clear on the hook and the characters before I dive in, so that I'm not doing a lot of figuring out. But I'm a pretty fast writer. I like to work. I like to sit down. I'm pretty routined. I have my hours that I sit down and I write. It's not the romantic waiting for the muse to strike, especially with having two young children in my life. I have to just use the time that I get. And so sometimes you hit gold and you write something that, makes it to the final draft, and other times you write something that gets cut. And that's just part of the process for me.
And what hours of the day do you prefer?
It's school hours. So, my kids are off to school in the morning, and usually I try to squeeze in some exercise before. And then I sit down and I have my hours from then until when I leave to go pick them up in the early afternoon. And, every day doesn't look the same. So if I'm actively drafting, then that's going to be my priority. When get my edits back, then I'm revising, doing all then it's line edits, the minor stuff. But even between then, there's a lot that goes into the author world. That's not just the writing. It's the planning events for a book tour, which is really fun and exciting, and getting to do social media and make sure my website's up to date. That it's really it's sort of like running your own small business, because you're not just responsible for the writing product nowadays. There's all of this other behind the scenes stuff that has to happen too. So it's definitely a challenge to balance those things as well, especially because if many of us come into this as writers and we don't necessarily have experience doing marketing or any of those types of things, or having a social media presence. Fortunately, some folks do, and they can use those skills. But for the rest of us, we're kind of figuring it out as we go and trying to do our best at kind of being a one woman or a one man show.
Tell me what it was like when you found out that your first book was going to be published.
So I think it was a mix. I was obviously thrilled, over the moon, but then there was this also other part of me that was like in disbelief. I think it takes so long to get to that point for most of us. And it feels like it's something that you've been waiting for so long. And it's so incredible that it's kind of hard to digest at the same time. Like, I think I was stunned a little bit. The editor that I have published with, Southern by Design and now Good Hair Days, I had pitched her other work that hadn't gone anywhere. And so it was one of those things where it was like, oh my goodness, finally, we're getting to a place where it's coming out. And it was just, yeah, it was magical. And then it was also like, hang on, let me double check. Are we right about this? So such a mix of feelings, but overwhelmingly really, really exciting and positive.
I saw a video on social media where you were saying, come with me into the store to see my book on the shelf.
Yeah, that is one of the most surreal moments. Physically seeing it out on the shelf. I mean, it's wild. Like, it's really because so much of the process is so individual. You sit at your computer and you write and you write and you write. And then even once, you send it in to your editor and it's getting, reviewed by not just one, but multiple editors and other readers in-house proofreading, tons of folks are reading it. And even, your writing friends or other people who are reading it before you perhaps even submit it to your editor. But still, it's a very small group of people. It feels like, oh, I'm gonna, somebody else is gonna read it. But then once it's on a shelf in a store, it's just such a crazy experience. And I just feel so grateful for my books to be out there too. Like, it just feels such an exciting opportunity. And seeing it in a store is just, I mean, it still blows my mind. I walked into a bookstore. I was in Greenville, South Carolina this past weekend, and I walked into M. Judson Books, and I looked on the Southern fiction shelf, and they had Southern by Design there. So, I was with my mom and my sister, and so I pulled out the book, and my sister was like, "Oh, I'm going to get my phone out. I'm going to take a picture of you with it." And it never gets old. It never gets old.
I really enjoy reading Good Hair Days, and the characters, they are so easy to connect with.
Oh, I'm so glad the characters in Good Hair Days are ones that are so near and dear to my heart. I had such a good time writing them. They're definitely flawed characters too. It's interesting when you try as a writer, when you try to strike a balance between you want your characters to be, liked, and you want the reader to connect with them and want to root for them, but that you also want to layer in enough of those flaws and those real human things that we see and we know in our lives, to make them, believable and down to earth. And I think that was one of the things that really in Good Hair Days, with the characters, that I worked really hard on, was trying to really balance that, you know, the softness with the, flaws, and to try to make them very down to earth and realistic. Um, Especially considering like the setting in this small town and this family run beauty shop, which has seen better days, that it, I wanted the characters to be very down to earth, and to have, and to make mistakes like we all do as well. And so I'm so glad you're enjoying them.
What is next for you? Are you already writing your next book?
I am. So, in fact, my next book, I just finished the edits on it, and I turned that into my editor, and I just finished up a few last things on that, and so that book's on its way to line edits. I have such admiration for folks that can be a line editor, because it's so tricky and it's so meticulous. And so that'll be next, and then yeah, that book maybe will be out this summer probably.
Is that one still top secret?
So that one hasn't been announced yet, but it will be very, very soon, probably after Good Hair Days is kind of out and running.
Did you always know that you wanted to write Southern fiction?
That was really what inspired me to start. So I was a big Dorothea Benton Frank fan. So I loved all of her books, the Low Country settings. I went to college at the College of Charleston in South Carolina. So for me, that was always a special place. I didn't realize how lucky I was to live there for 4 whole years, until after the fact that I really, moved away. And I was like, oh, goodness gracious, that was such an amazing place to live. Not that I did appreciate it at the time, but Dorothea Benton Frank's stories, I started reading them when we had moved back to the Atlanta area. And they really, really inspired me. And then she passed away in 2019. And I really felt, not that, I thought that anything that I was writing would be like her specifically, but I thought, oh, what a fun, what a cool idea to try to write something that's Southern. And I think, Southern culture is fun in so many ways. There's so many big personalities, and traditions, and things that are just really fun to write about. And I think as well, a lot of my writing, I like to have themes of the strength of family and love and the bonds of friendship, and ultimately these kind of hopeful themes that come out of it. And I think a lot of that is kind of embedded in Southern culture. I think that people do look out for one another, and people say hello to one another, and they ask about their neighbors, and they check in on people. There's a meal train for everything. And so that was one of the things that I think, especially because of the type of story I wanted to write, that also Southern culture really just kind of lends itself to it as well.
It really does, doesn't it? It is a very rich culture. Is there anything that you want readers to know? Do you have a message to your readers?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I would like the readers to know about Good Hair Days, that it's a bit of a tearjerker. So we pitched it as a modern take on Steel Magnolias meets Hello Beautiful, because we wanted to make sure that the readers know that it's equal parts fun, Southern hijinks, silliness of the women, and then there's also a deeper, more challenging part of the book too. So it's kind of sweet and salty. It's two things at once.
But I think that's kind of how Southern culture is, a little sweet and salty at the same time.
I think you're on the nose with that. That is so true.
Well, Grace, it has been so fun talking with you. Good Hair Days is out now. You're going to enjoy reading it, and we hope that you have a good hair day today. You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading!